John, we're back with trying to recreate the New York studio, at least in terms of capability in this remote location. How are you tonight, John?
I'm well. Looks good to me.
Yeah, it's
Looks fantastic.
it's doing. Thanks. It's doing all right. The biggest issue is probably reduced bandwidth, but I think we're going to be okay. We've got a great topic for tonight because very often people are saying, John Cullen, he's got to be doing Vegas, do more Vegas stuff. And guess what? Tonight we're going to talk about Vegas.
Yeah. It all circles back, unfortunately, in a rather uncomfortable way. But exactly. I mean, what is in the news today, what's in the news this week, has a direct connection to Las Vegas, and we're going to talk about that tonight in the show. Again, tip of the hat to the graphics department. The thumbnail's spectacular.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if people saw the subtle detail in the thumbnail, but that's actually what we're going to start the show with. And in the Mandalay Bay sign, you've got Mr. Zuckerberg and Dr. Fauci. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if everybody picked that up in the thumbnail, if you can see that, but you got Fauci and Zuck up in there, and we're going to talk about them as well. And we're going to talk about them at the first part of the show. And when we go patron only, we're going to dig into this connection between the new foreign policy that President Biden is.
John? Yes, we got a
That
little
has to
band.
do with a show that you and I did.
Sorry,
Did I
we
lose you?
lost you there for a second. You're frozen on picture too. So I think my low bandwidth coupled with your, foreign VPN deal. Hopefully we can get through that and it'll snap into picture. But we've got a kind of a still life of John Cullen. So sorry, take it back. You mentioned President Dumb Joe. It honestly, literally sickens me to. I can't bring myself to say the words that you just said, but you're talking about how he's changing his foreign policy.
Indeed. So
We keep losing you, man. We might have to
in fact, here I've got one. It says reconnect. You want me to
You're
reconnect?
back, but we might have to. Why don't we do that? Let's try getting you on another. Sometimes you can go through different VPN channels. You want to give that a shot?
All right, I'm going to disconnect from Skype. I'll reconnect with the VPN, and you call me back in
You
30
got it.
seconds, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the trials and tribulations of being on the road. I don't have my usual high-powered New York internet deal going here. How will we know when John has reconnected to his new VPN? Let's just give it a minute. I want to thank everybody who sponsors the show. We're going to be talking about how Joe is changing up the international relationship with our buddies there in Saudi Arabia. And I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. There's a number of things that Saudi Arabia does. Yeah, President Dumb Joe. Some people don't like that when I call him President Dumb Joe, President Stupid Joe. It's your preference, whatever you prefer. But obviously, there's a lot of things that Saudi Arabia does. There's a war on in Yemen that I certainly object to. I think Saudi Arabia is a strange ally for the United States, but I think the focus of our question here is this contradictory relationship with Saudi Arabia, where the United States economy is essentially based on the petrodollar, which relies on this relationship with Saudi Arabia. Ah, you're back.
Indeed. How's
That
that?
looks
Any
better.
better?
Yeah, it's working. That is. So let's get you back over here. So it was vamping there a bit, John. Fill us in on what you were telling us.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at an article. I think it came from Bloomberg. It did. Biden downgrades Saudi crown prince to recalibrate ties. So that's interesting. So President Biden is resetting the United States-Saudi Arabian foreign policy relationship, it appears, on a number of articles that I've been reading. And as I'm reading these articles, this realignment seems to be with the old regime. And the question then is, well, half these guys are in prison. Does Joe Biden know that?
It's right
Right?
up his alley.
Does Yeah, I mean, have they been studying this? Do they know what we know about what happened in Las Vegas? And quite frankly, what's going to make this show tonight really interesting is it's another double bind. And the reason it's a double bind, it's sort of a yes or no scenario. Either President Biden and his foreign policy team, right? So the Secretary of State, etc., the people who are setting foreign policy, they either know what we know about Las Vegas or they do not. It's
Right.
one or the other. So if they know what we know about Las Vegas, and yet this is the course they're going down, that kind of means they're siding with the people that tried to overthrow MBS, if that's what happened,
Well,
if
and
my hypothesis is correct.
basically engaged in an act of war on U.S. soil by shooting up a bunch of civilians.
Allegedly, right?
Allegedly.
So allegedly. So if the hypothesis is accurate, and we haven't seen another cogent hypothesis, quite frankly, right? So still waiting. But if this is true, and if this is what happened, and Biden's administration does know that, that's kind of creepy. He would then align with these people. So then the other side of the argument is they don't know what we know. And so that was what we were talking about a week ago when we were looking at Brookings and Bruce Rydell.
Right. And I mean, either scenario, frankly, is not good in my estimation. But
Biden's right, exactly. That's why it's a double bind, because neither scenario is good. It's like checkmate. Either way you go here, it's not pretty. And so we're going to talk about that when we go patron only tonight. But we've got a whole lot of content. In fact, tonight, I guess we should tell the audience that tonight's show is going to be longer than normal. You want to explain that?
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of a longer intro here on YouTube so that people can get a better sense of what the conversation is going to be about. And also, we're hopeful that more people will choose to sponsor the show by going to subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. You know, John, a bunch of people have been emailing me suggesting that I watch Rudy Giuliani's interview with Mike Lindell. I absolutely will. We're not going to talk about Mike Lindell on this show. Some people have been disappointed that I have been looking into some of the things that Mike gets into that I have questions about. I'm not going to question that tonight on your show, but I do want people to remember that, you know, MyPillow is a corporate sponsor of a lot of different news shows, and I would not have somebody on this show as a guest because they paid to sponsor the show. That's in fact exactly what we're trying to avoid by having this direct-to-viewer micro sponsorship program where everybody can have the confidence there is no corporate influence over the stuff that we report. And in fact, earlier today, somebody decided it would be a good idea to insult David Hawkins in the comments on Patreon. That sponsor was eliminated immediately. And that is another purpose of the micro sponsorship, is that nobody's coming in here and saying, like, I'm paid $25, $100, whatever, $1,000, whatever the number is, and telling you what you should or shouldn't talk about. We don't tolerate that. We're totally delighted to have people share information with us when it's firsthand knowledge of the things that we're talking about. If you're an expert in the field that we're discussing, if you were in Las Vegas and witnessed something, if you know Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, if you've got evidence to contribute, even if it contradicts what we say, proves us to be totally wrong, we want to hear it. If you've got an opinion, as long as it's polite, happy to have you share it. But if you don't like us, if you don't like the show, if you don't like a guest, I certainly don't care. Don't share it in a comment. Keep that to yourself. We go by the golden rule here. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything. I got a crackling HDMI cable, so I'm going to be conscious of that as we continue with the show, John. Why don't you give us a little more insight into what we're going to be talking about with regard to the Saudi royals and President Stupid Joe?
Sure. Can you check and see if we're streaming on my channel? I don't think we are. My live chat's not running, and
no.
I think we may not have triggered the the simulblast or whatever you do over
That
there
is
with your magic.
unfortunate. I think you're right. Something I did put in the stream key, but yeah. Well, we're not. But I'm glad you reminded me about the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. Again, when I'm on the road, there's a lot of technical considerations. These shows are much more difficult to do than they look, but normally we would have a simulcast of this show on the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. People can subscribe there for free and watch all of the great videos that John does during the week, as well as simulcasts of each of these broadcasts. We'll have it up right after the show for John's audience to watch on there, and I am sorry for subscribers to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel.
All right, I just put something in the chat explaining that people should go over to your channel and watch it there. And maybe if anybody's watching, you can go over to the Johnny Hoover channel. If this thing is like waiting, maybe you can put something in there and direct people over to Jason Goodman's channel so they can watch live. All right, let's get to the deck and take a look at what we got for the show tonight. What do we got here? Oh, you know what? While you're at the channel, why don't you show people what I put out this week? Because it was a little bit of a crazy week. First of all, after we did our show last...
Oh, now we just lost John. John, are you back? Can we...
Uh-oh.
Okay, you're back.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So during the week, after our show last week, I released the Ivor Cummins second episode, or the second half of the show with Ivor. And then in the middle of the week, we had another close call with another meteor/asteroid. And so I broke this.
Just die again?
Exactly. So this is another story of another asteroid. And it's sort of the question that I'm asking here, and again, people get confused by a lot of my videos because the way that I make them, it's I don't know if it's subtle or sarcastic or what it is that I'm doing, but so for example, in the "Did You Almost Just Die Again" video, we talk about Krakatoa, and I'm asking if do people know the story of Krakatoa, and people then in the comments start saying, well, this is old news. Old news, yes, that you don't know.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah. So old news.
So it's 2-year-old news that you don't know because nobody told you because they were busy talking about other things. So it's not that I'm not breaking the aspect of Krakatoa. I'm breaking the aspect about the asteroids. I'm using Krakatoa as a metaphor. And the metaphor is, if you're not told that something happens, how do you know it happened? If you didn't know that there was an Ebola outbreak in Africa this past week, if nobody reported it, how would you know that it happened? How would you know that there was an Ebola outbreak in Africa this week? You wouldn't know. And so when major things happen that go unreported, you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? Why would a major event go unreported? And we've been asking this question now for about a year. So this is a video worth watching. Now, also this past week, if you hop back, I did a video looking back at Wuhan and what happened in Wuhan. And boy, oh boy, you talk about social engineering.
I do.
Oh boy, this was spectacular. And if the audience hasn't had a chance to see this video, what happened in Wuhan, the essence of this is it's a very close struggle. And as you're watching it, you realize, this is heart-wrenching. This is the humanity of this. It's just horrifying. And then you realize, well, wait a second. Wait, whoa. Am I being sold? Am I being sold? Is the camera zoomed in just a little bit too close on this community? In other words, we're watching the horror of what transpires in Wuhan, and yet today, as we sit here, there's more people dead in Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst from Iowa They've got more dead in Iowa, and Iowa is like farmland. So Iowa has more dead than Wuhan.
Hmm.
Yet the film would lead you to believe that this was a pandemic unlike anything ever seen. And it does, I mean, clearly people are sick and people are dying, but it's as if the lens is so close. Imagine if you spent 3 weeks at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, entrenched at their worst peak, whatever, or whatever the worst hospital was in the States, and you were there filming for 3 weeks, and it was a mess. Okay, that's kind of what they did here in this video. And as we watch it a year later, the questions we start to ask now are, so wait a second, you're showing us this incredible story of Wuhan, but there aren't even 10 people dead in Shanghai. How come you don't cut away to Shanghai to tell us what the hell's going on in Shanghai? If there aren't 10 people dead there, doesn't that warrant 1 minute of the film? What about Beijing? If there aren't 10 people dead in Beijing, why doesn't that warrant 1 minute of the film? Huh. And all of a sudden you realize this was done on purpose. They zoomed in on this community in Wuhan to sell a narrative. And when you see them building the hospitals and you see the military coming, well, now, if you live in Cincinnati, if you live in St. Louis, Missouri, and the Army isn't showing up and they're not building hospitals, does the government care about you? That's the unspoken message. And so now their narrative creates a benchmark. So you mean we're not building hospitals all over the place? Why aren't we? Why aren't we building hospitals like they did in Wuhan? Why isn't the Army showing up like they did in Wuhan? And next thing you know, President Trump is rolling out field hospitals. Now, at the end of the day, Wuhan is fewer people dead than Arkansas, than Iowa. Right? This is a stunning statistic. Tonight, if on the main news tonight, you could break a major story simply talking about something that you and I talked about a year ago. There aren't 10 people dead today in Beijing from coronavirus. And there aren't 10 people dead today in Shanghai from coronavirus. And yet the WHO declared a global pandemic. That needs to be squared up. And the fact that everybody continues to ignore, and this is right in the open, all you have to do is click on the map. You don't need to be a programmer. You don't need to be a map designer. You just go look at Shanghai. And it's all there, right? So this isn't much of a mystery. So in this video, we look at the lab in Wuhan, and we look at this video, and we ask, was this a wag the dog production to sell a narrative? And if so, who made it? We don't know. It's all hypothetical. But it certainly is interesting to look back on this stuff about a year later. So
That looks like the freezer I had in college. It's like, well, gotta thaw it out.
exactly. So why don't you head over to the PDF I sent you, because now we have some supporting materials that'll make sense with the videos I put out this week.
Sure.
So the first slide,
John,
the first
if
slide,
you could, let's take your mic down maybe 10%, just a tiny little bit. Sounds a little bit hot.
You got it. It's done. It is now taken down. Okay, so if you go to the deck, the other deck, this is the deck for our patron only hour.
Ah,
And
yes, here we go. Coming up, deck 2.
there we go. All right, so earlier in the week, we had an asteroid fly by, real close call, and I put this meme up on the channel. So for the audience, I've been kicked off of Twitter. And,
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. There is a Johnny Hoover Instagram page or whatever that's called. And one of the guys who moderates the channel runs that for me. And there's only there's only two moderators and one, so one of them runs that Instagram thing. And basically what he does is he takes the things that I put in the community tab of the YouTube channel. So if you go to the Johnny Hoover channel, there's a community tab, and I use that as my Twitter. This is where I put the postings on the community tab of the Johnny Hoover page. And you can find all kinds of charts.
Man, low bandwidth is a pain in the ass.
Assuming it works.
Yeah, we can find charts. And what else can we find here in the community posts?
You're going to find links to articles. You're going to find links to information about the vaccinations from Pfizer, Moderna, statistical updates. So in other words, if I had Twitter, this is the type of stuff I would be tweeting. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't have Twitter. So for the audience, what I'm doing is putting the stuff out here, and then you guys can like right click on this stuff, download it, and then you can tweet this out. That's the idea. So I'm putting this up so that you guys can retweet Instagram, Facebook, whatever you're doing, and get this stuff out there. So I'm putting it up on the community tab of the Johnny Hoover channel so that you guys can share it.
That's a pretty creative idea. Nice alternative to getting banned by Jack Ben Dorsey.
Indeed. All right, so let's go back to our PDF. All right, so we had Real Close Shave this week. This is Meteor Asteroid 2021 DG, and it came kind of close earlier in the week, and you guys are probably sleeping, and I was probably awake, and I saw this, and I said, uh-oh, I got it. And then a day or two later, after I reported it, wait till you see what comes up in the news after I report this. Go to the next slide. All right, so this is the detail on it. So this, again, from JPL. So, and this one, actually, I think we saw this one coming before it got here. This is one of the rare ones we saw within 24 hours of its arrival. But it was close. It was close, and this is in the video. Now, the next day after I reported this, look at this next story. Look at the next story.
Dinosaur killing space rock may have originated at the edge of the solar system. Jupiter kicked
So now they're
toward
changing.
Earth.
So they're changing the origin of the Chicxulub event now, and saying it may have been an asteroid. Okay, so scientists now are changing the entire origin of the Chicxulub dinosaur ending event 65 million years ago, the thing that smashed into the Yucatan. And they're saying now it may have originated as more of like an asteroid than a comet or something like that. So the fact that they're changing the base of the story is rather fundamental here. And the fact that it came out within a day of this story that I broke, I thought that was also kind of weird. But
what do you think that indicates?
Nigeria. How is that not news?
Say again, what do you think it indicates, John?
Well, in other words, if the last major impact crater that we can see on Earth was the one at Barringer Crater 50,000 years ago, there's one or two of them in Greenland, but they're underneath the snow. You can't even see them. We wouldn't know they were there if it wasn't for LiDAR, right, or radar. We wouldn't know that they were there. So the only real visible impact craters on Earth in the last 50,000 years is this one and the one in Akure, Nigeria. And so when they're that rare, I mean, I'm talking about of size, right? There's been others that are, maybe 10 feet or, 12 feet wide, but I'm talking about, significant size. There's two of them. Now, there are others, you just can't see them because they're in places like Greenland inside the snowpack, like in a glacier or something like that, but then 12,000 years ago. But we didn't even know they existed. So the point is, they're so rare. When one of these happens, how is that not news? Particularly when Space.com and all the other things that we were looking at when Shep came on the show, right? And Shep started telling us to look up at this and that.
Yeah. Well, they probably think that the comets are
Uh,
pro-Trump, so they don't want to talk about it.
so, with all the news stories about close calls and one is coming on election day and all that, how do you not report the one in a Curray that actually makes a hole in the ground?
Well,
How
let me
is
ask you this,
that
John.
not reported?
How does the size compare between this one and the relatively recent Nigerian one? This looks smaller because we could see people on the edge of it, and
Oh,
this other one looks like they have to be in a plane to photograph it.
yeah, that's like a kilometer across or something. I mean, that's
Uh-huh.
massive.
So this is what destroyed the dinosaurs, they say?
No, 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 no. The dinosaur one was in It's called Chicxulub, and that's on the Yucatan, and that was 65 million years ago. This is 50,000 years ago. And by the way, the one you're looking at that's 50,000 years old, they
Hmm.
thought that was a volcano. When the guy bought it, everybody thought he was out of his mind. He thought it was a meteor crater, and
Hmm.
everybody else thought it was a volcano. And he said, no,
Now,
no, 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 it's a
now wait a
meteor
minute.
crater.
Here's another picture that says Chicxulub, but it looks like the same thing. Is this? Only
Mhm.
well-preserved peak crater. I don't know. Comet mysteries.
Yeah, it's in the Yucatan 65 million years ago. You can't see that, right? Those are artist
Ah,
renditions. Understand that?
got it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are artist renditions. So
What a
you
day
can't,
that must have been, right? The dinosaurs didn't even have the news.
yeah. Well, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that, right? We
Hmm.
never would have made it. Never would have made it. So
You get eaten
65,
by a T-Rex.
right? So that's 65 million years ago. This happens, wipes, and keep in mind these dinosaurs dominated the planet for millions of years. Millions of years, they dominated the planet, and then this happens, and it's lights out. So that was that. All right, let's go on. We got a lot to cover. A lot to cover.
Yeah, I think people want to hear about Vegas and Saudi Arabia and MBS and all that.
All right, before we get to that, we got to talk about the current state of affairs. And it's important for everybody to understand that although I have played a doctor on TV, I'm not a doctor. And so we do not give medical advice on the show other than ask your doctor. All right, so if you have any questions, ask your doctor. However, it's not a secret, though, that you have family in the medical industry, right? That's not a secret.
Yeah, that's not a
Right.
secret.
So I could ask you questions to
Well,
ask
I'm
your
not a
family,
doctor. Yeah,
but I
and
could
I'm
ask you to
certainly
ask
not.
your family.
I mean, we can get anecdotal opinions from medical professionals. We've had guests on the show, but obviously nothing we say is medical advice. And
Exactly.
any this is just conversation and a commentary and opinion about public information.
However, we are using information from the CDC. So the
Right.
information that I will be citing comes directly from the CDC. All right, so let's go to the next page.
Okay.
All right, so for example, we're not going to tell you what to do, what
Oh.
not. We're going to tell you to go to the World Health Organization and check their recommendations. So the World Health Organization recommends against the use of remdesivir, right? So we want you guys to check the official recommendations from the official places before you make any decisions, okay? So we're just going to show you official stuff. That's all we do here. We don't have any theories. All right, let's go
Wow.
to the
And
next.
this is recent, November 2020. So I mean, they've had time to look into this stuff.
Yeah, so it's not recommended. All right, also what we're going to be looking at on tonight's show is Project Veritas broke a story during the week with Zuckerberg expressing concern about modifying DNA and RNA. And then Zuckerberg gets on the Skype with Fauci, and we're going to take a look at that video clip. I don't think we're going to do it right this second. I'll tell you that, yeah, not yet. But the question is, when Zuckerberg gets on the phone with Fauci, do they know what they're talking about? Are they familiar with this
Well, I know Fauci doesn't know what he's talking about, and Zuckerberg,
technology?
once you
And we're going to look at a closer look.
step out of the range of Facebook, I'm not so sure he knows. I think he knows how to smoke meats and do stuff on Facebook. And other than that, I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg knows too much.
we're going to find out. So let's go to the next slide. See what we got.
Yeah.
All right. Also, in the category of not making any recommendations that are medical, we recommend that you speak to your doctor about the pneumonia vaccine. It's a one-time only thing. You may have had it already, you may not. But since many of the people who get sick with these respiratory diseases are also developing bad pneumonia, ask your doctor if this may provide some protection. And Jason, this is a great question to ask your family medical professionals. Is the pneumonia vaccine, which is a one-time thing, something that people should be considering, since it would protect them from the deadly pneumonia, right? So I don't know. I'm just pulling the stuff up at the CDC.
How come Fauci hasn't told people to take that? They love telling people to take vaccines.
It's a good question. I don't understand why he wouldn't, given the prevalence of pneumonia in the infected with both COVID and influenza. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. We need to ask our doctors about this.
This chair I'm sitting in is so noisy, it's making me nuts. It's it's distracting to be in a new studio, but we'll keep going.
You're doing great. All right. As I said, the data that we cite on the show, it's all from the CDC directly. So I go to the CDC's website, I pull the data down, and I chart it so that we can kind of make heads or tails of what's going on here. And so what you're seeing here is a chart showing all deaths from all causes versus deaths from pneumonia, influenza, or COVID versus deaths involving COVID-19 and pneumonia, excluding influenza. So the big number right now is 500,000. But the CDC gives us this number in the middle of that table.
This death involving COVID-19 and pneumonia, excluding influenza.
Right. So why would we want to conflate the data? I'm not really interested in the people who've died with COVID and pneumonia and influenza, nor am I interested in COVID and pneumonia and the measles or COVID and pneumonia and tuberculosis, right? So why don't we just stay focused on COVID and tell me what is the number excluding influenza? Okay, and what's that? Deaths involving COVID-19 and pneumonia, excluding influenza, is 210,000. So zoom back out and let's look at the chart. So that's 210,000. The 418, that's the rest. Now the big number that you want to use is the 418 plus the 210. And if you go back up to the little table above the chart, go all the way out to the right, and there's a number in the 600,000s. All the way to the right, there's a number 629,000. You see that?
329,000. Oh, no, sorry. Yes, 629,000. TV is very far away.
All right. So it says deaths involving pneumonia, influenza, or COVID-19.
It's just a grouping.
Why are we conflating the data? Why don't we have deaths involving pneumonia, shingles, or COVID-19? Deaths involving
gunshots.
Or COVID. So you take it for face value and you say, okay, so you get 629,000 people in this category. That is the biggest category they have here, other than deaths from all causes.
Some people feel they're doing it to specifically make it confusing.
Yes, absolutely, no doubt about it. So, but you can still figure it out. So that's what I'm going to show you. So you take the 629,000, which is their complete universe of COVID and or pneumonia and or influenza. Start with that number. Now we're going to subtract the people that have COVID and influenza, but not COVID and pneumonia, but not influenza. So what was that number over to the left? 210,000. If we subtract the 210 from the 629,
you got 420.
You're going to end up exactly. So the 420 plus the 210 gives you that number out to the right, the 629. So when you add those two pieces of the pie together, you get that master number. So the 210 is how many people have COVID and pneumonia and don't have influenza. So what's the 400?
I don't know.
Well, the other one's the people that don't have influenza. The 210, can you zoom out so I can see the pie? I don't see the pie. So when you look at that pie, there you go. So when you look at the pie, you got a red piece that's 210,000. You got a green piece that's 418,000, right? So if the red is deaths involving COVID-19 excluding influenza, then what's the green one?
Including.
I imagine. And then the 2.9 million is the remaining number from deaths from all causes. So we go to deaths from all causes, and that's like 3 million. And what I do is I subtract all of the COVID deaths, so you can't double count, right? So you start with deaths from all causes is 3.587 million. It's the second column in your table there, deaths from all causes. And we subtract the 629,000. It leaves us with 2.9 million. Right. So that's deaths from all causes. And when we look at the numbers this way, what we realize is if we separate out the people who are dying with influenza and COVID, which to me that's a whole separate issue. That's a co-infection. That's people have two things. It would be like COVID and tuberculosis. So for people who have both, that's a whole complicated thing. But most of the people do not. Most of the people do have influenza. And the people who have COVID and not influenza, it's a smaller portion, right? And compared to, zoom back out to the big chart and look at how many people are dying from stuff entirely nothing to do with COVID. That's the blue. Those are deaths from other causes. So when you look at the red wedge versus the blue wedge.
Yep.
And then, and you look at the red wedge versus the green wedge. Where are the bigger problems, right? And why is that red wedge grinding everything to a halt? And why isn't the green wedge getting the attention that it deserves since it appears to be a co-infection? And if the co-infection was tuberculosis or hantavirus or rotavirus, we wouldn't be paying attention to that? I think we would.
John, I want to just address a question from the comments here because it just went by. I lost the name, but someone's saying, what's the point of this? There is no COVID. Now, I'm not saying there is no COVID. A commenter said there is no COVID. COVID, coronavirus, it's a known thing. The point of it is we're evaluating data from the CDC. This is the data that governors and legislators are using to make the rules, and we are evaluating it to show the audience how contradictory their quantification of all these factors are and how confusing it is just at this data level. If we just totally ignore this and say, oh, there is no, that's not a very strong argument. When we break it down like this and show people how convoluted it is, how nonsensical and confusing even just the source data is, I think that makes a much more compelling argument than just saying, oh, this is fake or whatever.
Well, when you say that there's no COVID, you sound like a moron because there's people who are dead, right? So what are people dying from if there's no COVID? And the reason we're doing this, to answer your stupid-ass question, is to determine why people are dying. What are people dying from? That's why we do it. Let's move on. I don't take questions from 9-year-olds, so let's go on.
But I think people really want to hear about Vegas for sure.
Keep going. We'll get there. But, no questions from 9-year-olds. All right, net, the schools are still closed in America. I'm working on a podcast that's going to get into root cause analysis, and it looks at the Rachel Walensky interview on 60 Minutes with, or whatever it was, with Chris Wallace on Sunday. She did an interview with Chris Wallace on Sunday, and I'm going to break it down and do basically a class on root cause analysis, and it's going to be like a crash course, and that's coming out this weekend
on Patreon.
Yeah, that'll be on Patreon this weekend and Subscribe Star for my subscribers. and it'll be a crash course on root cause analysis. And we're going to do a case study, which is what they do at Harvard Business School. They use the case method. So we're going to use the case method, and we're going to break down the interview between Rochelle Walensky and Fauci this weekend on that. So that's coming. But one of the elements of it is that when we look at school-age children, 5 to 14 years old, there's only 69 of them dead as of the last update that I got. So out of all of these coronavirus deaths in the United States, there aren't 100 school-age kids dead, and yet they're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars to reopen the school. And we talked about you could buy the entire Reckitt Benckiser company 4 or 5 times over, which is the maker of Lysol and Dettol. And condoms. You could all the condoms ever made by Durex is that company, right?
What a deal.
Well, you can give them to the kids, and, so all right,
I saw a thing that a school had wasted millions on putting plexiglass in between the desks, and then the kids couldn't see the chalkboard or whatever they're using now.
Yeah, very effective. It stops the virus in its tracks. The virus doesn't know what to do when it gets to the plexiglass. All right, so here we've got 25 and older versus younger than 25 in the United States. So if you're 23, 24, 22, you get back to work and you shut up and you stop worrying about the damn vaccine, because it's not killing anybody in this age group. And this is the part that I'm confused with, is it seems that there's certain people that want to vaccinate everybody in America. Why would you vaccinate everybody in America 25 and younger if only 763 of them have died? What are you worried about? Are you worried about just getting sick and getting a fever and coughing? So you're gonna do an mRNA vaccine to prevent getting a fever and coughing? Because people 25 and younger just don't seem to be dying, Jason, unless you disagree with my assessment of 763 versus 400-something thousand.
No, I don't disagree. But you're asking who's saying it. I believe earlier today I heard President Dumb Joe say it. He wants everybody to get vaccinated. He's cracking on Donald Trump for apparently not ordering enough vaccines. And then they keep showing this video of him getting vaccinated. Joe getting vaccinated.
Yeah, there weren't any available, although Joe got some. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Oh, Joe. All right. So here's another thing that I don't think the audience is aware of. So the public schools and the opening of the public schools and all that, we've been talking on the show about the ratio of deaths with XX and XY chromosomes and how one sex has been dying dramatically more than the other. So if one sex is dying twice as much as the other, and one sex makes up more than 3/4 of all teachers in the United States, what happens when we put those two bits of data together?
You're going to get a high rate of death in that group.
Well, hang on. 3/4 of the teachers are female.
Mm-hmm. Oh, low rate of death.
Two-thirds of the deaths are male. If 2/3 of the death are male and 1/4 of the teachers are male, how about the men teachers just stay home? Male teachers, you stay home. Ladies, you got to get back to work because it just isn't killing you. All right. And the distribution of teachers, if the male teachers stay home, we can get back to school at 3/4, not 1 day a week. We can get back at 3/4 if all the men stay home. All right, now, I'm not saying it's a good idea. It's probably a really stupid idea.
Yeah, this could be an Andrew Cuomo idea. But wait a second, John.
Right.
We've only got about 5, maybe 10, if we push it, minutes left here. People want to hear about Vegas.
Nah, keep going. We're not changing. No.
Okay.
You got to understand something. You're talking about the entire school system in the United States.
Yeah. Okay.
Is broken, and they're talking about billions of dollars to reopen it. None of the kids are dying, and now we're looking at the teachers. What's the average age of the teachers? 42. So if the average age of the teachers is 42 and 3/4 of them are women, is that a high-risk group? No. which state has the most male teachers? Wyoming. Okay. So we're looking at facts. We're looking at science. That's all I hear on television, but I don't see people actually doing it. Right. So I'm saying that the state that has the most male teachers is Wyoming. But on average, the average age of the teachers is 42. And on average, 3/4 of the teachers are women. So if 3/4 of the teachers are 42-year-old women, what kind of risk are they facing? Let's go to the next page.
Is there a way to calculate that risk?
Yeah. So according to the United Teachers, whatever, that I'm getting this data from that I just showed you a second ago, they categorize the ages of the teachers accordingly. So they're showing you how many teachers are in each one of these age groups. Now, the age group that's most at risk is the 55 years older, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's only 17% of the pie. And 50 to 54 is another chunk, but most of the teachers are 30 to 49. And then another good chunk of them are younger than 30. So if we've got that many teachers who really don't seem to be at risk, what do we need $68 billion for?
I think most of that is to steal.
Well, that's alleged. You're alleging that.
Allegedly, most of that is to steal.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly. All right, let's go to the next slide, see what we've got, and then we're going to talk about MBS. All right, so the net. All right, we're going to need to stop here because basically what we're going to start the patron-only hour in is I'm going to show the audience exactly how you know that COVID deaths and influenza deaths were not double counted in either system and that influenza did not disappear. And I'm going to show you how you can tell and how you can explain it, but it takes about 6 or 7 slides. We're out of time. So we're going to have to do this when we get to patron only. And then we're going to go to MBS, Joe Biden, foreign policy, Maiteb Ben Abdullah, Mohammed Ben Nayef. And does Joe know what we know? Because if he doesn't know what we know and he's setting foreign policy, that's a disaster. And if he does know what we know, that's creepy. And
I don't think he even knows if he's wearing pants or not.
Well, that's the unsaid question here is, what does he know? And how could he possibly know what we know given how much time we've spent investigating it? Obviously, he didn't spend that much time looking into Frank Muth and all the things that we...
Well, no, he was playing Mario Kart. Give him a break.
Right. So that's the issue, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. We're going to look at the specifics.
Yeah. Well, we got about 2 minutes left before we're going to make that transition. And I want to thank all the sponsors that make this show possible. I'm still working out some of the details. You know, John, to do this road trip, I put together a lot of new equipment to try to recapture some of the features and functionality that I have in New York. It's always been a kind of a skeleton, not a skeleton crew, but, a reduced equipment setup. So there's some new things here, and every second of this is really only the second show I've done in studio. We had Hawkins earlier today, and we were at Larry Johnson's house the other day. And I don't know if people really appreciate how complicated it is to go to a different location, set up all this stuff, unknown internet capability in each spot. So I do appreciate the patience.
When you did it, when we set up we filmed a little segment in your hotel room, and you had and you had the 5 different iPhones all over the place with the battery wires. I mean, it took you 45 minutes to get the stuff set up.
That was fast.
And I was watching you do this Larry Johnson interview with Charles the other day, and that was great. He's a fascinating guy. What a great episode that was.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent.
I really liked it.
I know what you do to set that up to make it look so effortless, and it is a production. I mean, you show up with the wires and cables and tripods. I mean, it is something else. So tip of the hat to you. The audience has no idea what's going on behind the scenes, and you make it look effortless, but it's a bit of a magic show in and of itself.
I appreciate the compliment, John. And the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that I actually ran into a snag there at Larry's house because we had selected a really nice location in his backyard, kind of picturesque. And we were about 75% through the setup before I realized that we were too far from his office to receive the Wi-Fi signal. So we had to scramble and get back inside the house in order to make that show happen. And so I was just so sort of like on tilt when we started, and everyone's, sort of criticizing my performance as if I was Chris Cuomo or something, sitting in a studio where 50 people are running around. There's 2 guys working the sound, 15 people in the control room, the cameras, the makeup. And there's more people looking after Chris Cuomo's suit than there are producing this show. So I do appreciate everybody who
Yeah,
tunes in and
this isn't
watches.
Louder with Crowder. He's got the whole supporting cast back there running all the equipment. We're solo.
Right.
It's a whole different
Exactly.
thing.
But we
We got
will be
Tam-
back in less than 10 minutes on patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, and Patreon and Subscribestar/Crowdsource the Truth. I hope people will join us on there. We're going to get in depth on all the Vegas stuff, and we'll see everybody in less than 10 minutes. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.